So the next mode we're gonna go over is aperture priority mode. This is, again, just like shutter priority mode, except now you're gonna select the aperture. So you're gonna pick the aperture and then let the computer, or AKA the camera, do all the work for you. One of the things to keep in mind is, remember that a lower number will give you a very shallow depth of field, and then the bigger number, a higher number, will give you a very sharp, less shallow depth of field. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn my camera on and put it into aperture priority mode. So we're gonna start off by shooting a coffee cup in our subject's hand at the lowest that I can shoot on this lens, which is a 2.8, which should give us fairly good bokeh, and which by that I mean some pretty good blur. Cool, and then let's go 5.6. Then let's go 8. And then we'll try to get to 11. So 2.8, coffee is in perfect sharpness, and you can barely see that that's a person behind him. At 5.6, same deal, you're starting to make out the face. At 8 and 11, still pretty good blur, but you're starting to see, you know, those are two eyes. What happens when you back up about 15 feet, or however far you want to be, but far enough, and you shoot the same coffee cup, that's where your focus point is. And again, she's holding the coffee cup out. That depth of field starts to sort of narrow. So the distance between the coffee and her face, which are the two things we are at once trying to separate, start to come together because I've backed up. So when I back up at 2.8, you're starting to see her face a little bit more clearly than when you see her face at 5 feet closer. And the same pattern emerges when you go all the way up to 11, except when you start getting into 8 and 11 at 15 feet away, most of her starts to compress into sharpness. So it's a little counterintuitive, but you'll find this out when you're practicing this routine. If you're in your house, you know, set up a coffee mug, whatever you want to get, try shooting something at different aperture values really close up, and then go across the room and shoot the same thing with the same aperture values, and you'll automatically see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to switch back into manual. We're going to do the same sort of exercise. Manual is my favorite, if you didn't know. As I was saying in the shutter priority mode, that when we switch to manual, one of the cool things is trying to figure out, like, what factor do I start with? Do I start with shutter speed, ISO, aperture? Let's go with 70% of the time, especially if I'm shooting things that aren't moving, I will start with my aperture, because that really is going to determine my ability to capture things in focus. So remember, you pick the aperture that you want to be at. Like I said, I'm going to go with 5.6. Let's go with 3.2, because I'm going to shoot this coffee cup and I want some nice bokeh. I'll go with 3.2, and now I need a solve for ISO and shutter speed. The great thing about this, though, is that the camera still, even though it's not changing the settings for you, it's doing all the work. So you're going to look through, find your thing that you want to shoot, look at the meter on the inside of the viewfinder, and it'll help you solve for those factors. So at 3.2, I actually need to be at about 1/125 if I'm gonna shoot at 100 ISO. Now, it's a little dark where I'm at, and I wanna shoot a little faster so I don't have to worry about camera shake. So let's just say I go up to ISO 400, and at 400, that means I can get to about a shutter speed of 1/500. Which is a pretty good handhold speed. I don't need a tripod, and I can accomplish everything I need to do with that. So I'm gonna shoot the coffee cup again in manual mode. And then I'm gonna back up again. I'm just gonna show you the difference between 3.2 really close and really far away with nothing else change. Close up, 3.2 made a beautiful blur beyond the cup, and at 15 feet, 3.2, same focal length, made her start to become in focus in the camera. So she's still not perfectly sharp, but she resembles more of a sharp image than she did when I was close up shooting the same object.